That was over with Gene Warren and Leslie Huntley over at Fantasy 2. And was their supervisor over there for 12 years.
It was Hemdale. This was one of the production companies that was involved in the first Terminator, and Leslie and my partner Pete Kleinow and
I'm ultimately responsible for what the stuff looks like, getting it done on time and on budget. And when I started out, I started out definitely hands-on. When I did go way back, the Terminator, the original Terminator movie. I built the hunter-killer tank while I was running the shop, and other people were doing other things. And Gary Rodebeck was doing the tanker truck that exploded in front of the police station while I was building the tank. Other people were working on the hunter-killer helicopter, but not so much anymore. When I started out, I was making my extra money at night when I was working for other people doing stop-motion animation armatures. Good friend of mine who's passed away, Peter Kleinow, was a really good animator. And I would build the armatures and the puppets, and he would do the animation. We'd work together. We used to do Pillsbury Doughboy, Poppin' Fresh, Mrs. Butterworth, all that kind of stuff. And that was definitely hands-on. And, as I get more into the supervisory role, it's less hands-on. But I still ultimately am responsible and, usually make the decisions about how it is, the methodology to get it built, what materials we use, stuff like that. I still play with stuff. I still mechanically inclined. Any welding that comes through the shop, I do. Back when we were learning this, 30 years ago when we were getting into models, you learned everything. I can go out and make a hardback RTV mold. No problem. John and I had to do a model where we were the only ones, my son and partner. We couldn't hire anybody else. It was a really low budget. So we couldn't even get enough to use RTV to make the mold. But we were able to make a 16-piece hard mold that bolted together to get this project out. So that was one thing where I got to do a lot of the work. Him and I did all the work. So I have a background where you're not an expert in anything, but you really know a lot about everything. And so you can do that. So, and I think nowadays the model makers, they're more specialized. Some are good with small stuff, some are mold makers, some are painters, but you don't have that Pete Gerard, the kind of people that can do everything. The David Beasley's, the Ken Swenson's, that kind of stuff anymore. And you were hired because of your ability to make things look good. You have a set budget, they want something, and you do it, and it looks great. Not everything works out, but most of the time, you've tested it, you know what you're doing, you use the right people to get the job done, and you know how big to build something. You know how small you can make something and still have it look good. And a lot of times, I worked on a movie where I knew what size a certain thing had to be, but they wanted it bigger. Bigger is better most of the time, but in this case, you can multiply your problems sometimes. Now you're shooting something that's bigger, and it might not necessarily look as good as if it was smaller, because the smaller one was big enough to begin with, but you build it bigger, so you have to build it tougher. It's got to support more weight. You've got to shoot it against a bigger blue screen now. Everything multiplies. When if you discussed it a little bit more, you'd find out, yeah, that scale's going to work, and it's going to save us money, time, and cost.